Hello and welcome back to my two-part Scooby Doo review. If you haven't seen my first video where I go over the first Scooby Doo movie, you can click the iCard right here to go and see that one. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and get right into Scooby Doo 2. Upon starting the film, we are flown throughout the city of Coolsville by a pterodactyl monster man that eventually drops us off at a red carpet opening for a new monster museum. We then watch as all of Mystery Inc. get out of a limo and are immediately greeted by a horde of fans that match each of their individual personalities. Freddy is greeted by teenage girls, Daphne has creepy stalkers, Velma has nerdy people, Scooby Doo has other dogs, and Shaggy has a group of stoners. Also, in case you were wondering, yes, KFC did in fact sponsor this film. After a brief interview with the media, everyone heads inside for a tour of all the creepy creeps' creepy costumes. While Velma and Freddy are busy showing their guests around, Shaggy and Scoob start reminiscing about all the horrible times they've had while hunting monsters down, thus making me wonder why they continue to do this for a living. Daphne then stops by to tell them to stop acting like weenies because it's embarrassing, which they do try to do for about a second, well, until the pterodactyl monster suit winks at the duo. During the tour, Velma gets distracted by her love interest of the movie, Patrick, who is an absolute charmer. Once Patrick regains his composure, he walks over to Velma and the two start to have a conversation. Eventually, Pat asks Velma on a date, but because Velma is an awkward person, she declines the offer to go on a date despite the fact that she's really into the guy. Shortly after Patrick's rejection, the lights all cut off and some really rough wind shatters the windows in the room. Daphne then starts to investigate and discovers our Uber driver from the intro throwing a right fit and starts flying all over the room. The team then come up with a plan to lure Big Bird into some curtains and have Shaggy and Scooby tie him up, but the plan almost immediately backfires when the knot doesn't hold and Shaggy and Scooby start getting dragged around the room. As Shaggy and Scoob go for the ride of a lifetime, we're introduced to the main villain of the film who looks like an emo version of Dr. Doom. Doc then goes on a rant about how he wants to take down Mystery Inc. as if all the other bad guys haven't already made that point clear enough for us. Daphne then manages to save Shaggy and Scooby before the pterodactyl takes off with them, and now it's time to investigate the crime scene. During the search for answers, Velma finds a secret hatch that the bird boy could have used to get into the room without anyone knowing. She also manages to find a scale belonging to the pterodactyl, which then proves to them that the pterodactyl they just dealt with is far more real and complicated than anything that they've ever had before. The news reporter lady then comes up to the group asking them for a statement about what just happened at the museum. Gullibly thinking that the media isn't going to take this situation out of context in an effort to drive more numbers, Fred decides to speak to the news. Don't worry though, he immediately realizes it was a stupid thing to do in the next scene.
Fred Jones, leader of Mystery Incorporated, had this to say.
Little old Coolsville can solve its problems without us.
Fred, how could you say that? After watching their cameo on TV, the trio decide to start blaming Shaggy and Scooby for everything that went wrong, sufficely proving once again why it's so cancer to be part of Mystery Incorporated. Unknowingly to them though, Shaggy and Scooby are actually sitting in the kitchen listening in on the conversation. Once the trio of assholes leave the room, Shaggy and Scooby start to talk to each other about feeling like absolute screw-ups, despite the fact that in the last movie, Shaggy and Scooby quite literally saved the entire world single-handedly. They then take an oath to never be screw-ups again, and from that day forward, they want to be more like Velma, Daphne, and Fred. They start this endeavor by walking into the laboratory dressed like their asshole friends in an effort to be taken more seriously. While speaking to their friends about their lifestyle changes, one of their weird lab things beeps and prints off a result sheet for the pterodactyl scale they found back at the museum. The results state that the pterodactyl scale that they have found has been confirmed to be an actual real pterodactyl scale. This immediately causes the gang to ponder who from their past could have not only taken the original pterodactyl suit, but also somehow had the ability to give the suit itself life. During the brainstorm, we are introduced to the original pterodactyl bad guy, who was a man named Jonathan Jacobo. He's obsessed with monsters, he's a crazy smart scientist, and he's voiced an ultimate disdain for Mystery Inc. because they got him arrested. You see, the only problem is...
Impossible. 3 years ago, he attempted a prison escape.
Help me, sucker!
His body was lost at sea.
Yeah, that does kind of make it hard for him to have done it. Seeing how Jacobo couldn't have possibly created the monster, they start looking into Jacobo's cellmate, Jeremiah Wickles, who is also a monster-obsessed scientist that shares a lot of the same thought process with Jacobo. They then decide to go after Wickles' manor in an effort to question the old fella. After Shaggy freaks out about the creepy place and Scooby coaxes him out of it, the gang set off to the front door. After ringing Mr. Wickle though, the house tells the gang that Wickle isn't home and they'll have to come back later. Not willing to take no for an answer though, Fred once again rings the doorbell, which then causes a trapdoor to open, which then the gang falls into and lands in a metal ball thing, which then takes them down a roller coaster track, thus leaving them trapped until Mr. Wickle gets back home. Don't worry though, they aren't going to be trapped down here alone.
You want to buy a box of cookies?
Excuse me, have you heard the good news?
Yeah, there's cookies.
I see that Scoob and I have both joined the same religion. It doesn't take the team long to start trying to find their way out of the new spherical prison cell, and they find a fingerprint scanner attached to the lock on the door. Daphne then steps up for once in the movie and proves that she's not a pointless character by somehow using her makeup stuff to open the lock. Now that they're free from their prison, the gang go walking around the manor searching for any clues to help their case, which is also known as breaking and entering. The gang then split up and go searching around in 2 separate rooms. While Shaggy and Scooby search around Wiggles' room,
A clue.
very good, Scoob. Velma, Daphne, and Fred all head into the study and find some monster juice footprints that lead up to an upstairs portion of the manor where they find a book about bringing monsters to life. Shaggy and Scooby Doo eventually accidentally discover a clue upstairs while the rest of the gang is doing some light reading, but the investigation is soon interrupted by the appearance of a very much real Black Knight ghost monster. After a brief chase scene and a drawn-out fight between Daphne and the Black Knight, the movie makes a dick joke, and then the gang runs out of the manor as fast as possible, seeing how there's no way that they could take a ghost out. Once they get back to the lab, everyone splits up to do the rightful part of the information gathering. Although Scooby and Shaggy did find a clue at the manor, they ultimately decide to keep it to themselves and go off to the faux ghost to look around. But, of course, not without an excuse for the disappearance.
Hey guys, Scooby's feeling kinda like he's got rabies.
I truly do hope he feels better. After Shaggy and Scooby take off, Velma runs out of the lab to share her results with Daphne and Fred, but soon gets interrupted by an anxiety attack brought on by the sudden appearance of her love interest Patrick. She calls her way back over to the lab and tells Fred to get rid of Patrick, but Daphne negates that command by telling him to keep Patrick busy while she goes off to talk to Velma. Eventually, Daphne convinces Velma to give love a chance, which is a nice message to send to the families in the audience. Well, that is until Velma walks out in a freaking leather jumpsuit. Excuse me, what? Once again, it seems like I have to address how not PG these films are. Sigh. So Velma comes out to greet Patrick, but instead of saying hello like a normal human being, she says,
Who's your mommy?
Still, Patrick decides to be a gentleman and give the date a chance despite how weird Velma is acting. While Patrick is busy being traumatized, we catch up with Shaggy and Scooby as they scope out the faux ghost. As they assess the area, they can't help but to notice that literally everyone around the bar has been unmasked as a fake monster by Mystery Incorporated at some point. Knowing that they can't go in dressed as themselves, they end up putting on some disco costumes and making an absolute scene at the bar in a weirdly inconspicuous way. Shaggy then accidentally finds his way over to Old Man Wiggles and starts to have a conversation with him about whether or not Wiggles is still in the scaring business, and it turns out that he's not, though he still manages to frighten Shaggy off in the conversation when he talks about how much he hates Mystery Inc. Scooby then has his whole part of the scene where he's dancing with some lady at the club, and eventually his fake hair gets thrown off his head, and when everyone realizes that it's Scooby Doo, they chase both Shaggy and Scooby out of the bar and through a rubbish chute. Catching back up with our lovebirds though, we watch as Patrick and Velma show us how amazing of a time they're having on their date. The boring evening though doesn't stay very boring for long when the gang drive by the museum and see a swarm of police cars surrounding the building. Being the curious fellas they are, they stop to see what happened, and Fred is approached by the jerk of a reporter that interviewed him before, and she asks him about what Mystery Inc. is doing about the robbery that just occurred. Having no idea what she's talking about, Velma and Patrick head inside to get a visual on the crime scene. Patty then goes around messing the scene up by moving objects around that shouldn't be moved until after the real detectives have cleared it. Patrick then yells at Velma and the team go to leave the museum, but before they head out, Daphne jumps out of the van to confront the news reporter lady, but soon gets interrupted by Dr. Doom once again monologuing about how great he is, as if we cared. We then watch as Shaggy and Scooby are walking from the faux ghost when they see some dude yelling at some other dude to get him answers about what happened at the museum. Shaggy and Scoob decide to get a closer look and find out that it's actually Patrick yelling at someone because he's not a happy camper. After a minute or two of Patrick scaring the duo, they tell Pat that they need to head out and start to follow Old Man Wiggles to a condemned mining town. They start looking around for more clues, but end up running into some skelly boys that start chasing him. During the hot pursuit, Scooby accidentally opens an old mine shaft and the two retreat into it in an effort to escape. As Shag and Scoob head deep into the earth, Daphne, Fred, and Velma all show up to the mining town as well for some reason, because they somehow know that Old Man Wiggles is here. They end up barging in on Wiggles talking to a group of men in suits, and they start to accuse Wiggle of the monster attacks and thefts. The thing is though, that Wiggle is actually completely innocent of the crimes he's being accused of, though the reason that he's talking to the gentleman in suits is because he's trying to get an operation going where they turn the old mining town into a summer camp and force the children to dig for them for 16 hours a day, thus committing both child endangerment and enslavement. Thankfully though, the investors don't buy into the idea and Wiggles is left with the gang as they continue their interrogation. While that's all going on, Shaggy and Scooby finally make it to the ground floor of the mine, which is surprisingly filled with lab equipment and loads of chemical ingredients. As they start really looking into all the clues they've just found, Scooby finds a refrigerator full of liquid and starts drinking one of them. This then causes Scoob to turn into some weird Jabba the Hutt looking thing, and also starts an entire 5-minute sequence of events that leads to Shaggy becoming buff and Scooby becoming smart and then blowing open the locked door that once stood where the hole now is. After Scooby turns them back to normal with a potion, the gang starts to investigate the newly opened room and find a real monster maker inside that's powered by the glowing monster juice we saw in Wiggles' place. As Daphne, Velma, and Fred try to find a way to turn the monster machine off, Shaggy and Scooby start to investigate the room and accidentally start to 3D print their very own real-life zombie monster man along with the rest of the club of monsters. The rest of the gang hear the noises and head back over to help Shag and Scoob while also being sure to grab the control panel to the monster maker. They all then get chased by a bunch of monsters but eventually manage to get away. With nowhere left to go, the gang head to their old clubhouse from when they were kids in an effort to stay inconspicuous, but before we get to that part, we get to watch as the monsters commit a mass murder.
Citizens, turn in Mystery Inc. Your reward. We'll let you live.
Once again, this is a kids film. Once the gang gets to the clubhouse, Freddy starts to reminisce about when they were kids, though that soon gets interrupted by Velma coming up with an idea to reverse the monster making machine. While the trio's working on the panel, Shaggy and Scooby spot the weird scuba diving monster ghost coming out of the lake and then go to warn the rest of the gang about its presence. They all then jump into the van and try to get away, but before they can get far enough up the road to be safe, the ghost pulls out a spear gun and shoots the van with it, and even though it doesn't make any sense at all, the scuba dude manages to keep the gang from getting any farther. Freddy, however, thinks of a magnificent plan. If you can't go forwards, then just go. The gang then take off to downtown where they have yet another face-off with monsters. They of course win and eventually get to the mining town where they have yet another face-off with monsters, and yeah, I think you get the picture, so we're just gonna skip ahead a bit. After Velma defeats the Skelly Boys, she finds herself in a cave filled with candles, a projector, and a newspaper clipping of Jacobo Lennon standing in front of the crime museum when it was first constructed, thus showing that he couldn't have died when he tried to fly away from Alcatraz. Patrick then pops up out of nowhere and helps Velma find her glasses, and then the two have a brief heart-to-heart conversation while Velma is dangling from a ledge because she's pretty darn sure Patrick is the killer. Patty does prove to her though that he doesn't want her dead by pulling her back onto the platform and then sacrificing himself to save her from the pterodactyl monster. We then catch up with Shaggy and Scooby as they finally get away from all the monsters that they know about. Unbeknownst to them though, in the very same mine where they locked themselves into for safety from the monsters outside, another monster starts to form right behind them. Unbeknownst to the cotton candy monster though, Shaggy and Scooby have been preparing for this very moment all of their lives and are about to eat him alive. After finishing their meal, Shag and Scoob triumphantly take the lift down to meet their friends and end this monster tyranny once and for all. Unknown to the gang though, all the monsters have already regenerated and are ready to take them on once again. It doesn't take the gang a whole lot of effort to get through all the monsters at one time, but eventually they get through and Scooby places the panel back onto the machine and reverses the monster maker's progress. All the monsters then return to their suit forms, and after that, Dr. Doom trips into the same hole Velma did and gets hooked onto the bridge by escape. We then watch as a crowd of people storm the old mining town as if it's not a condemned police crime scene. A bunch of interviewers then start to ask the gang about who the person behind the mask is, which unsurprisingly is the blonde lady reporter from the museum, though she also used her cameraman as an easily manipulated accomplice, so he's involved too. In a genuinely surprising twist though, it turns out that the blonde lady is actually Jonathan freaking Jacobo in a mask. What in the world?
But how do you know this?
Cause he's right fucking there. Jacobo and the camera dude get arrested, Patrick and Velma make up, and we close the movie on the classic 2000s trope of having a dance sequence. To be honest with you, I've never really been a fan of the whole, dance ending trope, but hey, at least it's an ending. Just like the first movie, I think that this film has a lot of decent strengths whenever it comes to making a pretty decent film. The lighting, for example, is a definite upgrade from the first movie, although the color choices are rather hideous at times. The CGI has gotten much better from the last one, and I mean the script feels more alive, the jokes hit a little bit better, and it's still really inappropriate. Ay, man, this movie hurts my soul. Now, Fragdog commented in my last video that there were a lot more inappropriate things I could have touched on just to really drive the point home about how this isn't made for children, so I'm gonna do that this time. So let's list all the ones I can think of. There's Velma's outfit, fake news, Daphne referencing sex, references to murder, mass murder, bestiality, more references to murder, sexy Shaggy, camera dude trying to get into Jacobo's pants, and so much more that I just can't even. And yes, Sharky Malaki, I did see in fact that you said that this was originally made for a PG-13 audience, but the problem still lies that it's not PG-13. This movie was sat in front of a board of people whose sole job is to rate this movie and to determine what audience this is appropriate for. And this board of people said, yeah, this looks like a PG kids movie to me. Does that not blow your mind, Sharky? Guys, these movies, they're great. In a nostalgic, bad movie, bad comedy, hilariously just bad kind of way. But we've got to admit to ourselves that we probably shouldn't have been allowed to watch this as a kid. Overall, I'd have to say that this movie, Scooby Doo 2, was leagues better than Scooby Doo. Though, you know, they kind of both hit that same rewatchability place for me. I just found a lot more enjoyment in Scooby Doo 2 with the comedy, the delivery, the music. It just felt like the overall production value and the overall production quality itself was heightened, and it's nice. It's different. Ultimately, I'm going to be giving this movie a 4.5 out of 5 on my rewatchability scale. Essentially what that means is if you sat me down in your living room and we were going to cuddle, I would probably focus more on this movie than on you. Sorry. With both movies scoring a 4.5 out of 5 on my rewatchability scale, that means that overall this series also hits a 4.5 out of 5 on the rewatchability scale. Whether it be for reasons of nostalgia or because of its hilariously poor quality and jokes, this series just wins my heart over again and again. Though admittedly, the second one was again better than the first. But that's going to be it from me today. If you like this video, then like this video. If you have any movies you want me to review, just leave it down in the comments and I will get back to you. And if you want to see more content like this, I do release movie reviews every 2 weeks, specifically in the next month, which will be the month of October. I have 2 Halloween videos planned. I'm supposed to be doing Casper for the first video in October, and I'm doing Anna Scared Stupid for the second video in October. So, you know, subscribe if you're interested in that. Make sure to stick around, come visit me. You know, you'll see me around probably. Anyways though, that is it from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day. I'm very excited about those Halloween videos, I'm not gonna lie to you.